Next up is Brian from Conversion Sciences. In his talk, he's revealing his top persuasion techniques to influence and guide your customers along their journey. Brian, the stage is yours.
Hi, I'm Brian Massey, and I'm the conversion scientist at Conversion Sciences. I'm here to talk to you today about conversion optimization for your heroes' journeys. Now, we all love to see our prospects, our customers, even the visitors to our websites as heroes on a journey, a quest to solve the problems that we solve with our products and services. And of course, we want to be helpful in that journey. But I'm going to take another look at it because there can only be one hero in the journey. And if they're the hero, where does that leave us? I'm going to look at the hero's journey. I'm going to map onto it the sorts of things that we can do to help them along in their journey, not all of which are helpful and magical. My company, Conversion Sciences, optimizes websites. We are strictly post-click optimizers. We use a variety of tools in user research, data gathering to figure out what it is a visitor needs to feel comfortable and confident taking action on our customers' websites. So I'm going to start off with a quote from the Bible, which is unusual for me, a guy in a lab coat. But this is particularly poignant because it is a complete hero's journey in one phrase. It's attributed to Jesus Christ. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them also the other cheek. This is a complete hero's journey because it starts off with a call to adventure and a push across the threshold into adventure, all in this slap. The hero finds himself in a strange world, a world in which people will slap you, and has a trial, a moment of decision that he has to make. Making the right or wrong decision will determine if he completes his journey. He has to decide, should he strike back? I mean, this bozo is slapping him. Certainly his first instinct is to fight back because it's just not fair. And in that moment, he finds himself in the belly of the whale, that moment of indecision. But when he comes out, he understands the truth. It is a rebirth, and he turns the other cheek also. He gains an inner peace and an inner wisdom from this that he can then carry back to his people. And in this case, it'll show up in a book. Now, the thing that I want to ask about this, and myths in general, is that they all have someone doing the slap. But we don't really have the journey of that person. Every turned cheek requires a slap. So who's doing the slapping? Joseph Campbell outlined this hero's journey, which I just thumbnailed for you. It begins with the call to adventure, crossing the threshold into a strange new world, a path of journeys, trials, into the belly of the whale, where they're in moments of indecision, the death of the hero, where they become something else, are reborn and return changed. I want to also talk about the villain's journey and map it onto this process. So what do I mean by the villain? So the villain, the bad guy, the heavy, the antagonist, this is a person or organization sometimes that believes the world needs to change and tasks themselves with changing it. That's a pretty broad definition for the villain, and we begin to see villains in places we wouldn't otherwise expect to see them. So, if that's the villain, who is the hero? Well, the hero is a person and sometimes an organization that needs an external force for internal change. The natural external force is often applied by the villain. So my premise is that shoppers seek internal change. Sure, they're trying to solve an external problem, but they're ultimately looking for the satisfaction, they're looking for the career-changing results of hiring the right firm to solve a problem for their firm, or sometimes it's even just buying that perfect jacket that makes you feel better. But ultimately, our shoppers are looking for an internal change. They need a catalyst, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. The hero's journey maps out like this, and I'm going to map onto it what I would call the villain's journey. I'm sorry that villain has such a pejorative tone to it. If you can step into it and see it just as someone who sees the world as needing a change and expects them to be the person to exact that change, then you can see your own business and your own brand in it. Starts with the call to adventure. The job of the villain is to oppress the peasants. You all know the story of Robin Hood, where the sheriff of Nottingham taxed the peasants because he wanted to impress King Richard, and he sent his troops out to enforce these tax laws, and it became very ugly. And from this emerged the hero, Robin Hood. Maybe even you could call it an organization, because he had this merry band of followers. This is an interesting one. Crossing the threshold, because the hero naturally has a resistance to crossing the threshold. We all have a natural resistance to change, especially inner change. So the villain's job is to change the rules, to create an environment that just requires the hero to step across. And certainly going out and killing peasants that don't pay taxes they can't afford to pay is one of the ways that the Sheriff of Nottingham changed the rules. Next comes the path of trials, and it is the job of the villain to unleash the minions and begin to create challenges for the hero. This is how they find their way to the right answer and strip off childhood ways. The belly of the whale. This is that moment of indecision. Again, from the Bible, Jonah was swallowed by the fish, the belly of the whale, and was there for 3 days until he was right. Okay, I'll do whatever you say, God. Here's where the villain offers magical help, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Ultimately, the hero must die. The visitor must die to become a customer. He's going to become something very different, he or she. And it's the truth that it turns out the villain must deliver in a monologue of sorts to destroy anything that the hero is hanging on to that would keep them from crossing into this rebirth, this threshold of becoming something else. And of course, at this point, when the hero is reborn, it's the villain's job to give up the goods. The hero returns changed, and the villain lurks back to her lair. So, we've got the hero's journey and the villain's journey mapped out. I'm going to show you how these journeys can play out on a website. And there is a certain pejorative to villain. So we get to ask the question, which of these tactics is really within the boundaries of our brand? Is this something we should be doing? So who is the villain in your brand story? Well, I can show you an extreme example of an advertising campaign that created a very palpable villain. Back in the day, Listerine was a household disinfectant, and they wanted to get into the mouthwash gig. They wanted to sell their disinfectant as mouthwash. So they created a disease that was tantamount to bad breath called halitosis. Now, how many of you people think halitosis is a real thing? It's Latin, yay, but they made it up. It is a fancy word for bad breath. And we know what the root of bad breath is, but this was just an advertising ploy. We can do this too when we're writing headlines. So here are 2 headlines for a debt collection website. Debt relief that works for you. And that's very aspirational and really speaks to the needs of our hero. But free yourself from the burden of debt creates a villain, creates a bad guy, and it is the debt. And if debt is burdening you, then you are an oppressed peasant, a potential hero rising above. I love this example too, for an addiction treatment center, a place of new beginnings. This is what we call a very conceptual headline. This was tested by Mike Perla against this. Addiction torments addicts and their loved ones. Once again, we have a bad guy tormenting addicts and their loved ones. This is a complete story in 7 words. We've got the bad guy, the good guy, the conflict, and some resolution promised on the page. This was a 184% increase in conversions over the A Place of New Beginnings headline. So we can see how the villain can really play an important role. These are what we would term negative headlines as opposed to aspirational or positive headlines. and there are good reasons to believe that these work. But let's start at the beginning, the call to adventure. Advertising is really where we oppress the peasants. To give you an idea, following our Listerine commercial, these are the ads that were put forward by Listerine. Often a bridesmaid, never a bride. Marriage and halitosis. Don't fool yourself. Your marriage is at risk because of bad breath. Are you unpopular with your own children? This is oppressive. This is stirring the pot. This is causing people to say, oh my gosh, I'm going to go out and I've got to fix this. He's not going to call. Love is always a great place to turn the screws on your audience. So we'll generally see our advertising, our outreach, as stirring the pot, oppressing the peasants, and our goal is for the heroes to arrive and step forth. They must cross the threshold. And their first step towards that will be clicking on one of our ads and coming to our website. And at this point, it's the job of the villain to change the world, to bring the hero into a new world so that she can be, she can stop relying on the things that she's always relied on and begin to see new possibilities. This is a great example from the folks over at Copy Hackers. This is an underarm deodorant. It's a different way of fighting perspiration. Control your sweat. Again, very aspirational, very uplifting. They tested this one against, it doesn't even have to be hot out. My armpits are always wet. So we've got this sweat as the bad guy, but we've changed the rules of perspiration. It's not about being fresh and feeling clean. It's about avoiding embarrassment of people around you. The rules have been changed. How can you change the rules in your copy so that you are bringing heroes across that threshold? Here's another one. The longer your home sits on the market, the less you will make. And I love the specificity. We learn what to do that nets $9,875 more. This is for a realtor who is obviously looking for homes to sell. So the rules are changed from I can sell my house at any time, might be a good idea, to oh, I better get on this. Our next step is the path of trials, and it is the job of the villain to release the minions, to create obstacles, and we find these on our website. We introduce them on purpose and on accidents. Some of us are just natural villains. The first way of creating an obstacle is by too much choice. Too much choice. Whenever somebody says, oh, this page seems cluttered, we need to redesign it, what they're generally saying is that it's not really clear to the human eye what's most important on the page and what is least important. The eye is not being guided. There's too much stuff. And even adding long lists of features can often create choice that overwhelms the brain and becomes an obstacle. Just one more trial on the path of our visitors' journeys. Now, if we go a little bit further, we can use psychological techniques like anchoring, where we artificially lift the price of something only so that we can cross it out and offer what is perceived a discount. So this creates a psychological issue in the hero's mind, another thing that they have to get past, to get through, and it also can be very manipulative. And we're going to talk about some of the psychological manipulators that we can use. The belly of the whale is next, and we're going to offer some sort of magical help to get them out of the belly and on their path down their hero's journey. The belly of the whale is the moment of indecision. It's those times when we have decided that this could help us, but we just want to give it a minute more. An extreme version of this would be if you've got a leak under your sink and it's ruining your wood floors, you want to find an emergency plumber fast. And if you type in emergency plumber for your city, you will find listings for emergency plumbers. But the click-through is often like this. There's no mention of emergency here. Should I call this number? Could these people be here right away? What if it's the evening? What if it's the weekend? So what we've done is we've not provided any magical help in the belly of the whale. A better approach would be this: no extra charge, weekends, holidays, and nights. Austin Plumbers, 24-hour emergency plumbing. Here's the phone number. This is offering magical help to get the visitor out of the belly of the whale and on their path. And this is what Brian Eisenberg calls following the scent, giving them the scent as they go through their journey. So the magical things that we can touch on include a lot of what we call loss aversion. Now, there are a lot of studies that show that humans are far more afraid of losing something than of gaining something. And we can play this to our advantage. For instance, we can create myopic loss aversion, where we focus on short-term losses, even if it's a long-term decision that they're making. The sunk cost fallacy. Think about how much you've already spent. We see some of this happening when we take a long form, and we convert it to a quiz style solution. So they answer one or two questions all the way through. By the time they get towards the end of the series, they've already spent so much time answering questions that they really need to power through and get to the end. Sunk cost fallacy. Regret aversion. Emphasize how they will feel if they make the wrong decision. Agitating a problem is tried and true methodology in copywriting. How far do you want to take that, though? Status quo bias. Emphasize that you require less change than a competing solution. Pretty straightforward, right? Satisficing. Focus on good enough. Procrastinators and people who are what we call spontaneous buyers are really just looking for an excuse to get the problem solved, and they might bite on what you have to offer to their satisficing needs. And cognitive dissonance. Make the case that they're being hypocritical. Take something that they believe strongly in and turn it on its head. This gets their attention. This changes the rules. This is very villainous. It takes a certain amount of skill in copywriting, though. So an example of myopic loss aversion is 33% discount limited time promotion. And in fact, any time that you add time pressure, you're really focusing on myopic loss aversion, the fear of losing out. So they're implying the regret effect. This is one of the beautiful things about Black Friday and Cyber Monday, is that there is a time limit. This has to be done now. So there are a number of ways of going about this, and we see these all over the web. Here's one from a company that I know for a fact always has this available, but it says limited time only, get 20% off. Now, limited time only means that they could decide at some point that this isn't working and take it down, but there really was no time limit on this. And I think this is one of those places where you have to decide if you're going to cross the line. Are you offering real discounts to accelerate things because it's in your best interest, or are you just manipulating people? And you can also leverage these magical things by borrowing trust from other brands. So that's what testimonials are. When you use logos from companies that you've worked with, logos from associations that you're a member of, the Better Business Bureau logo, all of this works to borrow trust, bring in trust from other brands. This is the magic that helps the visitor get through and continue their journey. On the extreme end, there is this. So you've all seen trust symbols that tell people they are safe using your site and you can't be hacked. But I've seen more than one example where the company has simply engineered and designed their own logo. Ethical SEO, 100% satisfaction guaranteed. No one gave them these monikers, but they're using magic to help people feel more secure. And then there is the threatening of loss. I know you've all seen these on travel sites. If you're booking a hotel, only 2 like this left on the site. And one of the more extreme examples I've seen, oh, you've already missed this one. Now, if it's not in stock, if there are no rooms available, why would you put it on a page other than to turn those screws a little bit more? It makes them think, oh my gosh, I better act now, or I'm not going to be able to get this room. I might be standing out in the rain. So we've really provided some magical psychological help, and you can start to see where we can use this crossing lines. These are decisions you're going to have to make for your brand. The death of the hero is the monologue, and I love that scene from The Incredibles where Syndrome catches himself monologuing. But the key to this is where the truth comes out. So the villain finally lays out his entire plan and why the world needs to change and how he intends to change the world. It is the truth of his vision laid out to the hero, and the hero is like, oh, how could I have known? And monologues typically start with, you fool, like when we get to the end of a checkout process. You fool, did you think you could have books for just $59.65? This is where we begin to discover things like extra fees, shipping, tax. And this is where a large percentage of your abandonment comes from, because everybody knows that there's a monologue coming when they're on a website, when they're buying something on an e-commerce site, and they go and they want to hear the monologue before they make a final choice. They want to find out what the bottom line is going to be. Long forms. So a nice ad that brings you to a landing page, that takes you to a page that has a giant form. You fool, now you must tell us everything about yourself. And this is where the truth comes out. And this can chase away the hero, or it can give him that final thing that he must get through to spend himself and die in the process, and to be reborn on the other side as a lead or a customer. Addiction treatment centers, again, so this is, ostensibly saving someone's life who's suffering from an addiction, or a loved one who is trying to save someone in their family. You fool, you thought we would just help your addiction. Long, long forms. The good thing about a form like this is it really increased phone calls, which is a far more effective way to speak to an addict or a loved one. Problem is that monologues do hurt, and as we start to tell the truth through the process of, for instance, a checkout, we find people are shying away. They are not finishing their hero's journey. Consider writing your honest monologue first. If you were really to spell out everything about your value proposition, the good and the bad, that would be a great starting point, because you would find these points where what you are hiding, which you I think are weaknesses, actually are an important part of the hero's journey and can help them get through that process and be reborn. My favorite is from this movie called Crazy People. This was one of the ads that they proposed to the executives at Volvo. Buy Volvos. They're boxy, but they're good. Be safe instead of sexy, Volvo. If you wrote a few of these, you might find yourself discovering some aspects of your brand, certain honesty that you can carry forward. I'm not saying you should lead with everything that's wrong, where your disadvantages are, but we do go a little bit over the top and sugarcoating everything that we write. And then finally, of course, giving up the goods. They've gotten through the checkout process, they've completed the form, and we are going to give them the rewards of their labor. They have been reborn. They are now a friend of the company. They are beginning a conversation with us, and this is the chance for us to really help them solve their problem. Now, this is where something called the endowment effect comes in. And it's simply this, that we value or overvalue something simply because it's ours. And this really kicks in immediately after somebody has completed an action on your website. In fact, thank you pages are the best time to ask for more stuff. One of the things we love to do is to put a question on every thank you page, whether it's an e-commerce site or a lead generation site, and ask, what almost kept you from buying today? What almost kept you from signing up today? What almost kept you from requesting the report today? What almost kept you from signing up for the webinar today? Because these people are drenched in the endowment effect, they are more willing to answer your questions. You'll have very high completion rates on this, certainly higher than if you had posted it anywhere else on the website. And you're also asking the question of someone who has been through your entire process and may actually have a bone or two to pick with you. So thank you pages are great to ask for shares on social media. They're great to sell an upgrade to the product. They are great for selling anything additional that you could offer, such as training, things like that, that the buyer would want to have. You would think you want to give them a little breather and not ask them to buy anything more, but the endowment effect will begin to fade. So the visitor returns, changed internally, changed externally. They've become a customer, they become a contact, they become a lead. And you return to the lair, waiting for the next hero to show up and begin oppressing those peasants again. So we need our villains, and there's a kind of a good way of analyzing that I've come up with whether or not you are in a strongly villain mode, and how to move out of that. Because we really don't want to be in the mode of manipulating. We want to be in the mode of persuading, helping, serving. But we have to realize that we're dealing with humans, humans that are reluctant to cross the threshold, that will ignore the call to adventure, and might need a little help along the way. So I believe in villainary and visionary products and services. If something is commodity, that means it's easy to acquire from multiple sources. You're generally going to find it using more of these tricks. But if you can take even a commodity product and sufficiently differentiate it with your value proposition so that it becomes something different, then you do not need to be quite so villainous to get the hero to cross that threshold. If you're using cost-based pricing, which is markup, generally you see this with commodity type products, or are using value-based pricing, where you're pricing based on the value of what you're offering. You don't need to be as villainous. Is this a preventative or regulatory, like preventing halitosis, or is it enabling and aspirational, saving time, saving money, more convenience, more happiness, look beautiful, enjoy the way you dress? Villainary versus visionary. Is it opaque? Does the seller know more than the buyer? Or are you transparent? Can you be very transparent about what you do? Does the buyer know more than the seller? Is there time pressure decision on the decision? Like when your faucet is leaking and it's ruining your floors? Or is there time flexibility in the decision making? Villainary, visionary. High perceived cost of a poor decision, or low perceived cost of a poor decision. For those of you that are in the B2B world, you might be surprised to find that you're more on the villainary side, because not only is it possible that the company would lose money by choosing the wrong services and products for the business, but it could cost the person who made that decision their job. So there is a relatively high subconscious cost of someone picking the wrong HR management tool, for instance, or the wrong conversion optimization team. And if you look at the where certain industries and certain kinds of businesses fall on this, so apparel, for instance, selling shoes, if you add points for visionary and subtract points for villainary, apparel comes in at about a 0, right down there in the middle. But if you're Zappos and you have this amazing return policy, return the shoes anytime within a year, it allows people to buy several sizes, find the one that fits, and at any time return the one that didn't fit. So they created less of a commodity product and moved themselves a couple of points over. They also decreased the perceived cost of a wrong decision. Warby Parker, I think, did the same thing in eyewear, looking at airlines, which I'm sure not many of us have been on lately, but the discount airline scored very low, and I might have been a little hard on them. But a company like Southwest Airlines brought themselves up to 0, and they're doing things like they don't charge extra for bags, they don't have change fees, things that really have made the difference in me being a Southwest customer. But I've also shown you here insurance, healthcare, way down there at -6. This is one of the most villainous industries, and this is, I think, a problem. We're not going to get into politics, though. Auto mechanics. So to give you this gives you an idea of how businesses fall on the path, and you as a marketer and a brand manager, product manager, want to move yourself more towards the visionary, because all of the villainous techniques are available to you, but if you don't have to use them, then I think your brand has a much longer, more positive life cycle. So I'd like to hear your villainous examples. Your brand has an opportunity to mark itself on the villainous scale, and find ways to move more towards the visionary. Because while you can use those psychological tricks, it is better to be in a position where you don't have to. This is how we embrace our heroes. We take them on this difficult journey because it is a difficult journey, and we help them get through to be reborn, for inner change, and at the same time, we are changing the world a little bit, one conversion at a time.